The Northman is Robert Eggers' hotly anticipated big old mainstream studio picture breakthrough, and third feature film after the mighty impressive 1-2 punch of the religious superstition and sumptuous brooding folk horror of The Witch, and the maniacal, psychologically unhinged cabin fever brilliance of The Lighthouse. As something of a dream project for Eggers, The Northman is an equally brooding Nordic Viking revenge drama, which sets the wheels of its plot moving rather swiftly in the opening act, where we see the young heir to a kingdom take a vow of vengeance upon witnessing his king father get brutally and coldly slain and subsequently usurped by a familiar face. The young prince manages to escape with his life and is assumed dead by the usurper, once one of his trusted allies assures him that he is drowned. The action jumps ahead many years, as the eponymous scrawny young prince becomes a fearsome and muscly Viking raider, who, after a particularly brutal village siege scene, learns that some of their newly acquired slaves are destined for the ex-usurper and killer of his father on an Icelandic farm, for he has since lost his kingdom. Whilst the plot ain't gonna win the awards for originality, I'm glad that it was kept as simple as it was, since it allows Eggers to do what he does best, which is the following. 1. Fully immerse you in the film's time and place, with the well-researched set dressing and costume down to the deadpan dialogue delivery. 2. Milk the sweet teats out of the atmospheric possibilities therein, from the haunting combinations of sound and imagery to the deviations of the supernaturally tinged fantasy horror. So, a studio-backed epic getting the Eggers treatment that has worked so far so well for his more intimate, smaller-scale pictures. Does it work? Well, let's get digging into the good stuff first. The aforementioned scene setting is fantastic, and the filmmaking is top-notch. I love the mesmerising opening shot of the volcano with the gruff voiceover that really slips you into the zone. The Nordic castle grounds, inside decor and well-costumed characters in the first act give Game of Thrones a run for its money in sheer craftsmanship and ability to lull you into its world. It doesn't beat around the bush too with its initial pacing in order to get the necessary bits out of the way, because it knows it's going to give you some time to sink into some Eggers-style atmosphere later on, in the beautiful Icelandic volcanic farmland setting no less. I love Bjork's cameo in a stunning get-up as the blind witch who just appears and disappears out of thin air, and Willem Dafoe as a jester was an absolutely brilliant idea. Both are too fleetingly used, however. Anya Taylor-Joy of The Witch was outstanding as always, though, and certainly a welcome distraction floating atop the filmic sea of grunting, fighting and farting masculinity that forms the rest of the film. Oh, and that sentence was totally not a dig, by the way. I find it very refreshing that a film of this ilk is not trying to retcon in any out-of-place gender politics or unlikely quips into its vision of a hellish past. It is as it is, and I love it for that. The film shows Anya's character as a strong-willed woman, but respects that her talents lie in areas outside of physical domination and pummeling violence. This is evidenced beautifully in one of the film's best scenes in the latter act, where her and Prince What's-His-Name formulate and execute an ingenious plan together of cunning intellect and brute force, respectively. To segue a little into the more disappointing aspects of the film, I felt like there could have been more explored of Anya's character. I wanted to know a little bit more about her circumstances and how she ended up where she did. She seemed like an interesting and well-rounded character, and a little extra backstory or dialogue would hardly have been too damaging. I also think that the film's balance between fantasy and reality is a little too uneven for my liking, but I'm willing to accept that's just a personal taste thing on my part, as I'm not hugely into the fates, mythology and legends side of fantasy stuff. I'm more of a cosmic horror and Lovecraftian kind of guy. I did also find some of the character decisions a little too perplexing when it came to things like, killing someone when you have the perfect opportunity to. But again, I'm not massively knowledgeable when it comes to Viking honour, so it could just be something I'm missing there rather than the fault of the plotting. Now here's where I'm probably going to sound proper nitpicky, but the whole film felt a bit too much like a compromised work to me. Don't get me wrong, there's clearly a lot of weird and or contemplative Eggers moments and decisions here, and the slightly more mainstream actiony stuff was still handled very well. Excellently well, in fact, particularly from an editing perspective, as there's lots of one-shotters or carefully considered cuts that never disorientate the viewer or disrupt the geography of the action. It's just that I felt like there was two different sorts of films fighting for control here. One is a 90 to 100 minute slick and sharp Viking revenge drama, the other is a much longer, stranger and much more brooding art house flick. Both I feel would have been fine in their own right, but I'm not sure they've quite been married to their fullest potential here. I heard in another review that the studio demanded recuts after Eggers' original cut wasn't well received. I would very much like to see that version get included on a Blu-ray or UHD release down the line, as it might perhaps alter my opinion of the film. Given that there have been much more bastardised films resulting from studio interference after confused test screenings, Alien 3 immediately jumps to mind. I do feel that I'm being a little bit too harsh and nitpicky on the film here, as it still works much better than I was expecting it to. I'm sure there was a lot of compromise on the studio side too, given Egger's directorial reputation. I think the fact that the film's aspect ratio is a very unusual 2:1 framing is the perfect symbol of this, almost slap bang in the middle of the standard, rather boring, 2.35:1 cinematic widescreen ratio, and Egger's preferred 1.66:1 ratio. So I guess to sum up, I was just a little disappointed once it finished, as there were pockets of wasted potential that came to my mind a lot quicker than the extremely positive elements that I found myself pondering over the past couple of days since. My initial thought was I probably wouldn't watch this again, but now I could be persuaded to pick up the Blu-ray in a year or two to reappraise it. Plus, it would be nice to watch it again with subtitles so I can understand the other 10% of grunted dialogue that boomed out the cinema speakers with far too much bass.